We're now all pretty much wrapped up with E3 2017 this year. We've all done our discussions on who won E3 and our favourite conferences. Paul and I recently sat down to discuss that very thing in a recent podcast. If you haven't seen that, I do suggest you do so. It should be on screen right about now as a clickable link. But, of course, one of the main things we learned from Microsoft conference was, of course, the Xbox One X and its price tag. And we've had some recent comments from Microsoft's Mike Ybarra on that very same topic. My name's Amata, and in this Red Gaming Tech video, we're going to discuss what he had to say. Now, before I kick off, I just want to say that these comments were made as part of a very lengthy interview with Polygon. And I'm not even going to slightly scratch the surface of what they discussed with him there. I do suggest you check out the link in the description below, where you can read the full interview. And obviously we know now that the Xbox One X is going to cost $499, but before E3 there was some speculation from several people, including of course Web Security's Michael Pachter, that the console would cost $399. Now obviously that's not the price Microsoft decided to go with, but Polygon posed what I think is a very interesting question. Clearly they priced it at $499 for a reason, and if the recent rumours are true, they're not even breaking a profit. No, they're not making a profit. They might not even be breaking even. Phil Spencer refused to comment on whether or not they're technically taking a loss, which probably means they're breaking even, but either way they're not making a profit. So, what was it about the Xbox One X that, what couldn't they compromise on was Polygon's question here. And he said, quote, well, we wouldn't have been able to usher in 4K to the living room, and that was a design pillar for this particular box. There's lots of goals in the program, from compatibility to everything, but one, let's really usher in true 4K where developers don't have to think about, wow, how do we stretch this and make it really work? And so we leveraged a lot of PC technology, from the cooling, the power management system that's in this to get it this small, while managing acoustics. That was the goal. And obviously that leads naturally into, well, okay, that sounds great. You didn't want to compromise on your vision of bringing true 4K to people's living rooms, and obviously super sampling for those who don't actually own a 4K TV, which is cool. I respect a vision. I respect standing by that vision, especially when it comes to something like this. But obviously a lot of people are wondering, okay, but why does the console cost this much? $499 for what you're getting is actually pretty reasonable, I think. You pay a lot more than that for a PC with those parts, but it's still a fair chunk of change for many people. And here's what I'd say as to why the console costs as much as it does. When we created this box, we weren't thinking about price. We said, what's the technology we need to deliver real 4K experiences in the living room? We're going to come out with something last year similar to what a PlayStation 4 Pro is today, but that value proposition to us wasn't clear at all. It wasn't true 4K in the sense of what we're delivering and the power that developers told us they need. When we talked to developers, they said, we need the following. It was a long list. We had to figure out when we could come out with that box at a price point that made sense. This was the best product. The Xbox One X is something that we're still 100% behind, because as we introduce hardware more often, not only the games, even 15 years ago with original backwards compatibility, but all the games, all the hardware, the look and the feel of this box, for us it's a choice. You have $249, $499. You want to go spend $1,500 or whatever on a PC, rock and roll. Gaming is gaming to us. So that doesn't really answer the question as to why the console costs as much as it does. And to be fair, I wasn't exactly expecting Mike to be like, right, okay, here's the cost of each component, and then obviously you got, the R&D, and then you've got the marketing, and then, you've got other stuff that I probably don't know about. I wasn't expecting, a shopping list itinerary from Mike Ybarra as to why it costs as much as it does. But basically, it just comes down to, again, what he said with the compromise thing. They had their heart set on true 4K, and a little bit of shade thrown there at the PS4 Pro. As he said, they could have done a Pro where it was checkerboard rendering a lot of the time, bring more stable frame rate, or in some cases 60 frames, but obviously they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to just answer Sony with a similar powered box. They wanted to be like, here's our box and it's really powerful, it does this, it does that, it does the other thing. And obviously they had their ear to the ground with the developers as well, as he already said, and I think that's a vital part of what he had to say here, to be honest. Because obviously when you make a console, you're making it so people will buy it, they'll buy the games and so on, but if a developer can't work with your machine, we've seen with the PS3, it took a long time for that to pick up because it was a nightmare to develop for. Obviously that has not been the case this generation at all, and when Microsoft listened to developers and developers are going, we need X, Y and Z, they've obviously pretty much delivered on that as much as they could without cost, charging even more than they already are. But obviously there could have been corners cut, and obviously there's been talk of the fact that the Xbox One X has an internal power supply. It doesn't have a big brick like the Xbox 360 had, for example. The cooling system, they said it was created by someone at Microsoft. It doesn't have its own name. Obviously that in itself has got to have cost a pretty penny, not only to produce but also to actually research and develop and so on. And Mike pretty much admits that yes, they could have done less memory, they could have done underclock components so they didn't have to have the cooling in there, because a big problem that Microsoft have had, obviously with the 360 especially, is overheating. They also did not want a repeat of that. So with the components that they have, you need good cooling when it comes to higher end gear. It has to be done. So yeah, that would have probably knocked some costs off of it there. There is any number of things they could have done. Obviously we also know that the Xbox One X is the smallest Xbox they've made, even smaller than the S. And again, as I pointed out in a previous video I discussed on this, small means custom, and obviously custom means it costs more. But obviously, not only were they thinking of, okay, we've got to get the specs to do what we want, you're thinking about the consumer. The consumer, most of the time, doesn't want a huge box that is taking up half the TV cabinet. That brick thing was just kind of like a pain in the arse on the Xbox 360. And obviously, even if you had done all these things that Mike is saying, you'd underclocked, you didn't have the expensive cooling, you had the external power supply, you're probably still looking at a $400, $350 console, like just putting numbers out of the air basically. But you're still looking at a console that is still fairly pricey. And obviously they wanted this to be a premium product. They've said this from the start. And when you're paying premium price for a premium product, you want it to look and feel premium, which is fair. And that's pretty much what Mike says here. So I can kind of see where he's coming from there, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it could have cost $100 less or $150 less, and maybe people would have been okay with that. Maybe they wouldn't have done, but clearly Microsoft felt, hey, look, this is premium. Do we really want it to be a huge chunky box that's bigger than the original Xbox One? Do we really want it to have the external power supply again? Do we really want it to look cheap when we're charging so much? That sort of thing is obviously what you've got in mind here. And finally, the last thing I want to touch on from their interview is, once again, the topic of backwards compatibility, which has been coming up an awful lot lately. Obviously, we learned that original Xbox games are coming to the Xbox One and obviously the X and the S as well. And obviously, there's been talk from Phil Spencer recently that he wants to bring original Xbox emulation, plus maybe Game Pass and potentially even Xbox 360 games to the PC in some form. But obviously, there's quite the challenge there. And I do want to just read what Mike has to say here, because I think he puts it very clearly. Quote, Phil comes into my office and says, hey, let's going on this. The engineering challenge there is hard. You have a very fixed, specific set of hardware, into buses, network capabilities, and a console versus PC. From memory, how much dedicated memory you have. This is a custom version of Windows 10. It's not just Windows 10 you throw on a desktop and you start playing. DirectX on Windows 10, very different from DirectX here. I have access to every single register on the hardware on an Xbox One. They're on Windows 10 PCs. I've got abstraction layers. Game developers do amazing work to target what exactly in these boxes, and when you take that and try to put that on a PC, the engineering challenge is dramatic in solving that and making it run the way the customer expects. Not just from Xbox to PC, look at emulation on anything. It's always a challenge. And to be fair, this is a fair point. The original Xbox emulation clearly was a lot of work for them. They did 360 first, because obviously it was easier to do, and even then, while they have an impressive amount of games from that particular machine on the Xbox One, there's not the whole library, because some games are just too hard to get working. Perhaps there's not enough demand to make the amount of work that it would take worth it. That all that stuff. Basically what he's saying is, it's not just, hey, this can run on this Windows 10 on Xbox One, so it should be able to run on, PC, and obviously when you're dealing with 360, you're dealing with a different OS there as well. It's sadly not that simple, because obviously we're talking on a game-by-game basis. What code did the developer use? Is that code friendly with PC? If it isn't, well, we've got to find a workaround, or it's not going to happen, that sort of thing. So basically, I think what's take from this is they clearly want to do it. Phil Spencer has said as much, and they have shown that they generally are better with PC gaming. They have pretty much stood by their promise to not leave PC gaming, floundering in the dust like they have in years past. So I'm fully aware, and I think I should say, that I do think they are working on doing what Phil said, but clearly there's a lot of challenge here. You're talking about numerous variables, talking about games that were not made for the PC in numerous ways, and obviously it's not saying it's impossible to bring it to PC, because obviously many games have done that before this whole backwards compatibility thing even started years ago. It's just saying it's a challenge, and obviously you have to think about, okay, is there enough demand? Is this game actually going to sell? Who actually wants this game on PC? All that sort of thing. So some interesting stuff there from Mike Ybarra. I think it shines a little bit of light into Microsoft's mindset when they were making the machine, and why they chose the components they did, why it cost as much. Obviously we didn't get a breakdown like I said, but still some interesting stuff, and there's a bunch more that I didn't touch on. As I said, there will be a link in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts as always. Your support is always appreciated, and I'll see you next time.